Hi, thank you guys for being here. What are your names?
Hey, I'm Pranav.
I'm Pallavi.
Alright, and can you just name a couple of your interests and what you're doing right now in terms of school or work?
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Pranav. Like I mentioned earlier, I graduated from Yale last year. I currently work as a product manager at StubHub. Some of the things I'm interested in are engineering. I like working at a tech company like I am right now. Big fan of giving back to the community, and yeah.
I'm Pallavi, as I mentioned before. I graduated from Duke last year, and I am currently in med school at the University of Michigan. Interest-wise, I'm in med school. I'm really interested in kind of social medicine, so learning about communities and taking social determinants of health into practice. Not sure what specialty I want to go to, but right now I'm thinking emergency medicine, but we'll see.
Nice. Alright. So why did you guys start Funbotics? What was like the kind of process you had to go through for that? And then what was your vision in the start and how did it change over time?
Yeah, so it's crazy. Funbotics, we started in 2016. It's currently 2023, so that was 7 years ago at this point. Just so crazy to look back at. We were sophomores in high school when we started it, and it was pretty much like a simple summer camp for students at a local church to learn about robotics. And we basically put together a couple of Vex robotics kits. We did Vex robotics when we were in middle school, and we're a part of the whole competition circuit, so we wanted to try to increase access to that because our team had lost funding when we were in middle school, and we wanted to try to increase access there. So we went to a local church and basically brought these robotics kits and had the students learn how to build the robots over time, over the course of a couple different sessions, and then had them compete in a robotics competition towards the end.
It was kind of wild how it started. We thought we would only get 10, maybe 15 students. We ended up with like 50 just in that one church. So our goal definitely was pretty much reached. We really improved access there and introduced like 50 kids to robotics, which was really great. We realized how hard it was for people to get into engineering and STEM when our robotics team lost funding. So from there in high school, we were like, let's start this robotics camp here at our local church. And the camp went really well. We taught a lot of students math, and we had a range of kids from like first grade all the way to 12th grade. So it was pretty wide. And we kind of used that to our advantage. We had the older students kind of teach the younger ones. And we made more of a local competition. And a lot of students from there expanded and they joined their own outside competitions as well. They got a lot of recognition through that as well. So it started off with a really big kick, and we're super happy that it's been going on for 7 years.
So what made you guys do it again? Like, how did this turn into more of a long-term thing?
Yeah, I mean, so when we started it, it was kind of a lot of just for fun. We went to this church. We wanted to bring back and relive a lot of the robotics that we did in middle school. So we decided to teach it to a large audience. And because the first one was so successful, because we had amassed way more students than we thought, we saw that there was a real need to increase access for STEM in local communities. So the next summer we had decided to do it again. And it was also a success the next summer as well. And we sort of just continued from there and came to the understanding that there's a never-ending need for STEM outreach in local communities, and we wanted to try to fill as many gaps as we could in that area.
All right. So I know you guys were on a middle school team, but what other resources and inspiration did you have to start Funbotics? Like, what made it possible?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of what made it possible, I think that we had a lot of support from our local community, especially the church that we worked with. Hope Aglo was really, really great. They were the first church we've ever worked with. And we had a lot of support from their staff. We had a lot of support from the students as well that came in not really knowing what to expect. This was our first time putting on a camp, and the students were really, really open to learning. There were some students that were more open to learning than others, and working with all different types of students was something that we had to learn along the way. But we had a lot of support from the students, a lot of support from Hope Aglo Church, and we had asked around, got a lot of our friends and family to get involved as well. So support from them and some funds that we were able to raise in the local community that allowed us to buy these robotics kits, allowed us to put everything together.
Nice. Did you want to...
I have nothing to add to that. That's pretty accurate.
So, why do you think the organization stayed active after you guys graduated high school?
I think throughout, while we were building the organization throughout high school, we had a lot of volunteers, and just like the support that my brother was just saying, like all of those people who helped us build it in the first place, they're really passionate about Funbotics, and so were we. And I think that passion really allowed it to stay and grow after we graduated high school. The volunteers that helped us while we were leading really took over very well. And so they were able to expand, they reached out to other churches and other students, so they were really able to grow the network from there. And it kind of really just goes back to the support and passion that we kind of established. So I think we're established in multiple different churches here, and then we also wanted to kind of continue it after when we were in college. So we were able to grow it in college as well, so we could kind of expand access everywhere in the country, which is really huge because it's not just a problem here, it's a problem everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the primary thing that allowed it to keep going is we were able to get buy-in from the volunteers. A lot of our original volunteers were just from word of mouth, spreading the word around school, spreading the word around our family and friends in our local community. But when you're actually on and as a volunteer in these camps, it's a very different experience than what you would think. Working with students directly and seeing the direct impact that you're making. The students, it's really transformational for them, being able to understand that they have the ability to do something that they didn't think that they could do before. And this is something that we've continued to see as Funbotics has grown. The students came in not really knowing much at all about engineering, about how to use a screwdriver, those simple things like that. And being the person that's able to give that knowledge and pass that on to the students is really, really empowering for the volunteers as well. And I think that that's how we were able to retain a lot of volunteers, is through that empowerment, showing the volunteers that what they're doing really actually matters, and that's what's allowed them to continue to keep Funbotics alive even after we've graduated in the local Northern Virginia community.
Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense actually. So when I was volunteering at a Funbotics camp, I learned, I know I was there to teach the kids, but I learned a lot about them and their community and what kinds of interests they do. And I actually found out that they kind of have the same motivation, the same passion, and the same goals as me in life, and they're just underrepresented and under-resourced. So what kind of things did you guys learn from doing the camp? What kind of things did you learn about the communities that you were teaching?
Yeah, for sure. I think that it takes time to learn about these specific communities. I'm definitely not from one, but working with volunteers that are from under-resourced communities and also working with students that are from underrepresented communities, I think that I've gained a little bit of insight into what sort of resources they do have and where they want to go. I think the primary thing to understand is that everybody's really passionate about engineering. Everybody's really passionate and wants to go somewhere really great in the future, want to become engineers, want to become doctors, want to do something really impactful. It's just the access to resources that will really make the difference in if students are able to achieve these sorts of things down the road. And that's sort of the gap that we want to fill in. So that's sort of what we've learned about the communities a little bit. Students are really shaped by their surroundings, and lack of access is sort of a cycle that continues. If a student is from an under-resourced household, that passes down to the next generation, and that keeps going. And I think it's all about breaking that cycle, and that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I love learning about communities. That's one of the reasons I like medicine. So I learned a lot about the whole community and the students themselves. Just like even when we're not doing robotics, you're just like casually talking, hear about like their hobbies, their like what they like to do, and a lot of it comes from what they've already experienced. And so a lot of times while working in the camp, I found myself realizing that, wow, like when somebody comes up to them and says what they like to do, we've now added, hey, I like to do robotics. Like that is now a thing that they can say that, you know, I like to swim, I like to play with my friends, I like to go outside and, I don't know, play with my neighbors, and now I also like to do STEM. Like that's another thing we get to add. And you know, learning about their families or siblings, usually a lot of times these camps, it would be all of the siblings come from, again, all different age ranges. You kind of also get to see that camaraderie, and they're all learning together. So not only am I learning about the community, but I'm also kind of building it, which is something I never expected, to like make those connections. So that's what I think I've gained the most out of robotics, is really learning. And you don't realize how much you can learn from a community until you're like pretty involved. So
Yeah, absolutely. Like at the 3D printing camps that we had, like there were basically a bunch of people who already knew each other, and like the way they like interacted with each other was pretty cool. So specifically about the camp, so you guys started off with robotics. How did Funbotics transition to 3D printing like it is doing now?
Yeah, so that's a crazy story. It really had a lot to do with the pandemic and how Funbotics grew at Yale, which is where I went to undergrad. So I went to Yale in my first semester, met my Yale Funbotics co-founder, Anthony, who's also really passionate about local communities. He himself is from a under-resourced Hispanic household, and he was really, really passionate about trying to provide the most access to STEM as possible. So we both started Funbotics at Yale, implemented the same robotics camp that we had done when I was in Virginia, and ran that for a couple of semesters. And then the pandemic hit, and we went into this online era where we couldn't teach students in person anymore. And we didn't feel like just because we couldn't be in person anymore, we couldn't make impact, but we needed to come up with a quick way to transition. And around the same time, we went into the Startup Accelerator at Yale in order to grow Funbotics into a larger national organization, try to reach more areas of the United States. And during this time, we were really thinking about new ways that we could reach students, how we can create the most widespread impact possible. And at that time, I was thinking it would be really cool if we could get engineering into the homes of people and try to integrate it into their day-to-day lives. And that's sort of where the idea of 3D printing camps came to be. I had just messaged a couple of 3D printing companies seeing if it's possible to get sponsorships, and surprisingly, cold messaging does work. And we had gotten our first sponsorship with Creality for our first camp to provide and send 3D printers to the households of several students across Connecticut, where Yale is, and also in Virginia as well. And that's sort of how the 3D printing camp came to be.
Nice. So why do you think a startup or organization like Funbotics was so appealing to all these other organizations? Like, why do you think it was appealing for Yale to be a part of it? And then also, why do you think it was appealing for like a sponsorship?
Yeah, I think it's appealing in its simplicity. Providing STEM outreach is not really too complex. We're not really doing anything that's that crazy. We're simply providing a resource to students that don't have it. But the simplicity and the impact are the two main things that I think are its real attractors. Lots of students at Yale were really interested in the cause. They're also really passionate about 3D printing and helping out communities. So it was pretty easy to message into our mechanical engineering major group and see if we could get more volunteers for Funbotics. That's how we sort of grew the organization at Yale, and everyone's really, really passionate there about trying to make impact in local communities. There's a lot of areas in New Haven where the school is, where there's students that need access to 3D printing, need access to these different engineering resources and don't have them. So I think that's where that buy-in came from.
So why do you think that the impact is big? Specifically, why do you think that like learning for under-resourced kids to learn about STEM was so important, and why do you think that attracted everyone?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's specifically the age range that we target. Middle school students are extremely impressionable during that time, and a particular life experience during that time can impact the trajectory of their life. So being able to provide 3D printers, which is something when I was in middle school, the concept of a 3D printer wasn't even super mainstream at all. It was like something that I thought like major scientists were working on. I didn't even know that much about 3D printing at all. I guess that was like almost 10 years ago at this point. But now we're trying to make it more mainstream, trying to get it into the homes of kids, trying to get them excited. And I think that it's really the tangibility of it, having a 3D printer in your home and being able to hit print and have something that you can hold and something that you created on your own in your hands within just a couple hours, the impact of that and how that moment can influence the trajectory of someone's life. I think that's like the really impactful part.
I think it also kind of reaches out to how fun it is. Like, so many people, when you say 3D print, it's like you're literally creating your own toy, or you're creating a useful gadget that you can use on a practical day-to-day basis. And like Brian said, like middle school years and like the age range, that's like, you learn a lot. And adding this to like your itinerary of things that you can do is really cool. And it's like, it's almost as if like, I don't know, when me and my brother were kids, we played with blocks all the time. And we'd show our parents like, look what we made. And now it's kind of that graduation into a tech age where instead of blocks, kids can now be like, look what I printed. Like, look what I modeled this, I like 3D printed this. And it's kind of like a keepsake, you know? Because blocks you have to, Legos I think you can kind of save, but some of them you're eventually gonna have to break them in order to build new things. And you can keep making 3D as long as you keep having the 3D printing material, you can keep making more, and you can have like a literal whole shelf of things that you've made and 3D printed. And I think that really speaks to a lot of kids of how fun it is. And that's what's going to get people hooked. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like, I've literally gone to school like as the start of the tech age happened. So like first with like bringing laptops to school and then having robotics and 3D printing involved in like the elective stuff. So yeah, it's all pretty cool. So have you guys seen any like specific tangible, like do you guys have any examples of how the Funbotics camp helped kids? Like any like specific example or specific kid that you thought like the camp really helped this person?
Yeah, we have a lot of students in the camp that are already, so we have like a wide audience of students. A lot of students have never heard of 3D printing. A lot of students have heard of 3D printing but have never had access to it. And I think that those students are the ones that I'm most excited to work with, and those are the ones that I've been most excited to work with in the past. We had one particular student who was obsessed with like action figures, creating those sorts of things. And she had always wanted a 3D printer. It was always on her Christmas wish list, but she comes from a family that wouldn't be able to afford a 3D printer. And so when we provided the opportunity to join this camp for free and get a free 3D printer, the family really jumped at it. And this student was also autistic, so it was a little hard for her to like pick up a lot of things really, really quickly. So her mom was pretty much sitting next to her the entire time for the camp. And I think that like this is a huge testament to our volunteers and the flexibility of our volunteers, being able to work with all different kinds of students and really focus on the main point, which is how can we get them more interested in engineering, how can we get them more interested in 3D printing, and how can we like buy them in and give them what they need in order to be able to make them successful. So I had spent a lot of one-on-one time with the student because they wanted to go even beyond what our curriculum had. They wanted to learn how they found this website called Thingiverse where you can basically find any sort of STLs that you want to print. And she had gone and found STLs of her favorite action figures. I'm not sure which specifically from, but she wanted to print these action figures so she could play with them. And so we had not gone into that aspect of 3D printing yet, because there was a lot of different supports and settings that you needed to do in order to print these things because they had failed the first couple times. I had sat down with her and showed her how to do all of these more intricate things inside the slicing software, and I think that was really impactful. And she had written a thank you note after about the camp, which is really, really heartwarming. I know throughout the Startup Accelerator, there's a lot of business side of things that we did in order to build Funbotics and create it into the organization that it is today. But that sort of moment is really at the end of the day why we're doing what we do, is for that sort of impact moment, not necessarily in order to try to create this massive organization that does a ton of different things. My favorite part of the journey is that specific moment.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think my favorite students are the ones, it's kind of weird, the ones who originally don't like being at the camp, and then suddenly there's a moment during the camps where they're like, oh my god, this is so cool, and I actually do love it. That switch is always so fun to see. I've kind of resonated with that because I didn't think I liked STEM originally, and then as I got more into it, I realized how cool and fun it was. And kind of making those connections because everyone relates to a different part of STEM. So one student that I worked with hated being there at first. He was miserable, and every single second he could tell me, he would tell me. And then suddenly during the 3D printing aspect, when we were modeling things, I showed him that he could take things from online and put them into his own CAD. And he was like, oh my god, wait a minute, this is like Minecraft. And he got so into it, and he downloaded all of these different files, and he made his own city. He had a pool and a mansion. He made his own little universe in the CAD. And he absolutely loved it, and by the end of the day, he was like, we have to come back. And I think for me, that's really my favorite moments is showing people how, that STEM isn't just math and science and, calculators. It's imagination.
Wow, those are such nice stories. Actually, there was one kid that we had in the most recent camp where he has Onshape. He's been working with Onshape for so long now, but he's never actually had the chance to put it and make it come to life. And I think that was a really big step for him to finally make his CAD designs come to life. Okay, and then could you quickly describe to me what the program is like at Yale and where you have your students come from and how you schedule your camps?
Yeah, so the way it's sort of fluctuated a lot since the pandemic, and since I was there. When we first started, we had each semester a robotics camp using the Vex robots. We had sort of split the students into 5 or so different teams where they would all build their own Vex robot over the course of 7 sessions that would take place throughout the semester. So we would hold 2 programs per year. And they basically, at the end of the program, competed with their robots, similar to what we did in Northern Virginia. And after the pandemic hit, we had switched into a more online model where we did 3D printing and also some online engineering activity camps where we would have them try to build the tallest tower with popsicle sticks, try to build a bridge with popsicle sticks, build a race car, those sorts of engineering activities that they could do in their own homes. And now that we're back in person, now that the pandemic is mostly over, people are back to doing these robotics camps on Yale's campus, and we're going to continue to do 3D printing camps as well.
Nice. And what do you think the future of Funbotics is? where do you think it's going to go?
Yeah, for sure. And also to answer part of your earlier question, where the students come from, at Yale we partner with Yale Pathways to Science, which is a program for local students that come from under-resourced backgrounds, and so they basically funnel the students into a program, and we select the students that we feel need the program the most, and that's how we have the students for Yale Funbotics. In terms of where Funbotics is going next, we're definitely going to continue to do more 3D printing camps, try to keep the engagement for that up. We're hoping to continue to do those and also establish a new program in which students can use their 3D printers that they had from their original camp to build robots. The concept is that we'll send them an Arduino microcontroller and a couple motors, and then they'll have their 3D printer, which they can use to basically build the rest of the shell around the robot and build their own robot through that process. So it's basically taking the 3D printing to the next
And there's a local